Dr. Hanpark stood at the large viewing window of Space Station NK-427, watching the stars shine in the darkness of space. He checked his white coat one more time, making sure his name tag was straight. Today was his first day as the only human doctor at the Galactic Medical Center, and he wanted to look perfect. The station's halls were filled with different alien species. Some had blue skin, others had scales, and a few even floated instead of walking. Dr. Park smiled at each one he passed, even though most of them quickly looked away. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and many aliens found them strange. At the hospital entrance, a tall alien with silver skin waited for him. This was Dr. Kiwu, the medical director. His face showed no expression as he looked down at Dr. Park. "You are the human doctor," Dr. Kiwu said. It wasn't a question. "Follow me. We have much to discuss about your unusual placement here." Dr. Park kept smiling as they walked through the bright white halls. The hospital was huge, with medical equipment he had never seen before. Alien doctors and nurses moved quickly between rooms, speaking languages his translator could barely keep up with. "I must be direct," Dr. Kiwu said as they entered his office. "Many on my staff do not think a human should work here. Your species is known for being emotional and unpredictable. This is a place of science and medicine, not feelings." Dr. Park sat down, still wearing his gentle smile. "I understand your concerns, Dr. Kiwu. But sometimes emotions can help healing. I've seen it many times. Healing comes from medicine and proper procedures," Dr. Kiwu replied firmly. "Your human ways may work with your kind, but here we follow proven methods. You are only here because of political agreements with Earth." Before Dr. Park could respond, emergency alarms started blaring throughout the station. Dr. Kiwu's communication device lit up with urgent messages. "A transport ship had an accident," he explained quickly. "Many injured are coming. Now we will see if you can handle real medical work, human doctor." They rushed to the emergency area. Injured aliens were being brought in on floating stretchers. Some had burns, others had broken limbs, and a few were barely conscious. The medical staff moved quickly, but Dr. Park noticed they seemed unsure about treating so many different species at once. A small alien child was brought in, his blue skin pale and his breathing weak. The other doctors passed by, focusing on patients they knew how to treat. But Dr. Park went straight to the child, his smile never fading. "Hello there, little one," he said softly, checking the child's vital signs. "I'm Dr. Park, and I'm going to help you feel better." The child's parents watched nervously as Dr. Park worked. He talked gently the whole time, explaining what he was doing, making small jokes, and keeping his warm smile. He mixed medicines carefully, checking the station's database to make sure they were safe for the child's species. Dr. Kiwu watched from across the room, his silver face showing the first hint of interest. The human doctor's methods were strange, but the injured child was already showing signs of improvement. The parents looked relieved as their child's color returned to normal. By the end of the emergency, Dr. Park had treated 12 patients of 8 different species. Each one had responded well to his care, even though he used the same gentle, smiling approach that Dr. Kiwu had criticized. As the emergency area quieted down, Dr. Kiwu approached Dr. Park again. "Your methods are unusual," he admitted, "but your results today were acceptable. Perhaps there is something to your human approach after all." Dr. Park just smiled wider. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly, looking at his new workplace. "Just wait until tomorrow." The smile never left his face, and somehow that made some of the alien staff more nervous than any human frown could have. A week had passed since Dr. Park started working at the Galactic Medical Center. The alien staff still watched him carefully, especially when he smiled. But something more interesting caught their attention that morning. A young Nexian was brought to the hospital. The child looked like a small blue crystal with delicate arms and legs. She was very sick with a rare disease that made crystal beings turn cloudy and weak. Her name was Mina. and her parents had traveled across 3-star systems to find help. Dr. Kiwu called all the senior doctors to examine Mina. They used their best scanning equipment and discussed treatment options in serious voices. The child got worse as they talked, her crystal body becoming darker by the hour. Dr. Park stood in the back of the room, watching. He kept smiling, even though the situation was serious. Finally, he stepped forward. "I have an idea," he said. "It's different from standard treatment, but I think it will help." The other doctors turned to look at him. Dr. Kiwu crossed his arms. "What do you suggest, human doctor?" Instead of answering them, Dr. Park went to Mina's bedside. He pulled up a chair and sat down. The smile on his face grew warmer. "Hello, Mina," he said softly. "Would you like to hear a story while we help you feel better?" The crystal child turned slightly toward his voice. Her parents watched nervously as Dr. Park began telling a happy story about Earth's rainbows and how they made crystals in the sky. As he talked, he carefully gave her the medicines that the other doctors had agreed on, but in a different order. "The interesting thing about rainbows," Dr. Park continued, his smile growing brighter, "is that they only appear when sunlight and rain work together. Just like how medicines work better when we feel happy and safe." The other doctors wanted to interrupt, but they noticed something strange. The cloudiness in Mina's crystal body was starting to clear, just a little. Dr. Jai-yun, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped closer to observe. Dr. Park kept talking and smiling. He told more stories about Earth's beautiful crystal caves and the way they sparkled in sunlight. Every time he smiled, the monitors showed small improvements in Mina's condition. After 3 hours, Mina's crystal body was noticeably clearer. After 5 hours, she started asking questions about the stories. By the end of the day, her condition had improved more than anyone expected. "I don't understand," Dr. Kiwu said, reviewing the medical data. "You used the same medicines we would have used. Why did they work better with your method?" Dr. Park just smiled. "Sometimes healing needs more than medicine. Humans call it bedside manner, making patients feel safe and happy while they get better." Dr. Jai-yun was especially interested. She had noticed something odd in the medical readings when Dr. Park smiled at his patients, but she couldn't explain what it meant. "Your human bedside manner," she said carefully. "It seems to have measurable effects. Would you allow me to study this further?" "Of course," Dr. Park answered, still smiling. "I've always believed a doctor's smile can be the best medicine." Some of the alien staff found his constant smile unsettling, but they couldn't argue with the results. Mina was getting better faster than any similar case they had treated before. As Dr. Park left that evening, he passed by Mina's room one last time. The crystal child was sleeping peacefully, her body clear and bright. His smile grew even wider, and for just a moment, the lights in the hallway seemed to shine a bit brighter too. None of the alien doctors noticed this small detail. They were too busy studying Mina's recovery data, trying to understand what the human doctor had done. Only Dr. Jai-yun watched him walk away, her medical scanner quietly recording data about his smile. Dr. Jai-yun sat in her office late at night, studying medical records from the past month. The numbers on her screen told an unusual story. Patients under Dr. Park's care were getting better 30% faster than others. She had been watching him carefully, trying to understand why. She opened a new file on her computer and began typing her observations. Patient recovery rates show unexpected improvements when Dr. Park is present. The effect is strongest when he directly interacts with patients. His smile appears to be a constant factor in these cases. The door chimed, interrupting her work. Dr. Kiwu entered, looking concerned. "You've been studying the human doctor," he said. "Have you found anything unusual?" Dr. Jai-yun showed him the recovery rate charts. "Look at these numbers. They don't make sense. His patients heal faster, even though he uses standard treatments. The only difference is his presence and that constant smile." Dr. Kiwu frowned at the data. "Perhaps he is using unauthorized treatments. We should investigate more closely." In the medical ward, Dr. Park was checking on his latest patient, an elderly alien with breathing problems. As usual, he was smiling and telling gentle stories while administering treatment. Dr. Jai-yun watched from the observation room. She had installed special sensors to monitor both the patient and Dr. Park. The sensors showed strange energy patterns whenever he smiled at patients. The readings are strongest when he's directly facing them, she muttered, making notes. It's almost like his smile is producing some kind of healing effect. Later that day, Dr. Park treated 3 more patients. Each time, Dr. Jai-yun's sensors recorded the same unusual patterns. The effect was subtle but real. During the evening shift, an emergency case arrived. A worker had been injured in the station's lower levels. The patient was in severe pain, and normal pain medications weren't working. Dr. Park approached the patient, wearing his characteristic smile. "Everything will be fine," he said softly. "Let's get you feeling better." Dr. Jai-yun watched her sensors carefully. As Dr. Park smiled and spoke to the patient, the pain readings began to decrease. The patient relaxed visibly, even before the new medicine was administered. "Impossible," she whispered, checking the readings again. "His presence alone is affecting the patient's condition." After the patient was stable, Dr. Jai-yun reviewed all her data. The pattern was clear now. Dr. Park's smile wasn't just friendly behavior, it was doing something to his patients, something that their medical science couldn't explain. She decided to confront him. She found Dr. Park in the break room, still smiling as he wrote his reports. "Your smile," she said directly. "It's not just a human expression, is it? What are you really doing to these patients?" Dr. Park's smile grew slightly wider. "What do you think I'm doing, Dr. Jai-yun? The data shows energy patterns we can't explain. Your presence alters patient recovery rates in ways that shouldn't be possible." Dr. Park stood up slowly. His smile remained, but now it seemed different somehow. More knowing, more purposeful. "Humans have many secrets," he said quietly. "Some of them we're only beginning to understand ourselves. But tell me, Dr. Jai-yun, does it matter how the healing happens, as long as patients get better?" He left her standing there, still smiling that mysterious smile. Dr. Jai-yun watched him go, then rushed back to her office to add one more note to her file. "Warning: human smiles may be more dangerous than we thought. Further investigation required." A loud explosion shook Space Station NK-427. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the medical center as alarms blared. Dr. Park was finishing his lunch when he heard the first calls for help coming through the hospital's communication system. "Attention all medical staff," the emergency system announced. "Major accident in Industrial Sector 6. Multiple casualties incoming. All doctors report for emergency duty immediately." Dr. Ki-woo's voice came through next, sounding tense. "This is a Level 1 emergency. We have over 200 injured workers coming in. Prepare all available medical bays." Dr. Park rushed to the emergency department, his face showing that ever-present smile even as he ran. When he arrived, the scene was chaotic. Injured workers were being brought in continuously. Some had severe burns, others had broken bones, and many were unconscious. "Chemical explosion in the processing plant," Dr. Jai-yun explained quickly as she worked. "The safety systems failed. We haven't seen this many casualties since the station was built." Hour after hour, Dr. Park worked without stopping. His smile never wavered as he moved from patient to patient. Other doctors took breaks when they became tired, but he kept going. Even after 20 hours straight, he maintained the same gentle, smiling presence with each injured person he treated. Dr. Jai-yun noticed something remarkable. The recovery ward where Dr. Park worked had fewer complications than the others. Patients there seemed to stabilize faster, even those with serious injuries. She checked her monitoring equipment repeatedly, watching the strange energy patterns that appeared whenever he smiled at a patient. After 30 hours, Dr. Ki-woo tried to make Dr. Park take a break. "You've been working too long," he said. "Even humans need rest." But Dr. Park shook his head, still smiling. "There are still patients who need help," he said softly. "I'll rest when they're stable." By the time 36 hours had passed, the emergency was finally under control. The final numbers showed something extraordinary. In Dr. Park's section, the recovery rate was significantly higher than in other areas. Patients with similar injuries were healing faster under his care. Dr. Kiwoo called an emergency meeting of the senior medical staff. "These results cannot be explained by standard medical science," he said, showing them the data. "Dr. Park's patients are recovering at impossible rates." Dr. Jai-yun presented her research. "My instruments show unusual energy patterns whenever he treats patients. The effect seems strongest when he smiles directly at them. We need to understand what's really happening." In the recovery ward, Dr. Park continued his rounds. He was tired now, but the smile remained. As he checked on his patients, the monitoring equipment in the room recorded another surge of the mysterious healing energy. A young maintenance worker spoke up as Dr. Park examined her injuries. "Doctor," she said weakly, "when you smile, the pain feels less. How do you do that?" Dr. Park's smile grew slightly wider. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the best healing comes from the heart, not just medicine." As he left the room, Dr. Jai-yun watched him on her monitors. The energy readings were stronger than ever. She made a final note in her research file. "The human doctor has worked for 36 hours straight. His healing effect has not diminished. If anything, it has grown stronger. We must discover the truth about his smile before it's too late. What if this is just the beginning of what humans can do?" Dr. Jai-yun sat in her private laboratory, surrounded by screens showing test results. After weeks of research, she finally understood what was happening. Her hands shook as she read through the data one more time. "This can't be possible," she whispered to herself, but the evidence was clear on every screen. She quickly called Dr. Kiwoo to her lab. When he arrived, she showed him her findings. "Look at these brain scans," she said, pointing to the images. "When Dr. Park smiles at patients, their bodies release special healing chemicals. These chemicals work like natural medicine." Dr. Kiwoo studied the scans carefully. "But how is this possible?" "It's the unique structure of human facial muscles," Dr. Jai-yun explained. "When humans smile, they use 42 different muscles in a specific way. No other species in the galaxy has this exact combination." She showed him more data. "The human smile creates a specific energy pattern. This pattern triggers healing responses in most alien species. It's like a universal key that unlocks each species' natural healing abilities." Dr. Kiwoo looked shocked. "Are you saying that all humans can do this?" "Yes, but Dr. Park seems especially powerful. His medical training combined with his natural smile makes the effect stronger. He knew about this all along. That's why he never stopped smiling." Just then, they heard footsteps behind them. Dr. Park stood in the doorway, wearing his usual smile. "I wondered when you would figure it out," he said quietly. Dr. Jai-yun turned to face him. "You knew about this effect. Why didn't you tell us?" Dr. Park walked into the lab, his smile gentle but somewhat sad. "Would you have believed me? If I had said that human smiles had healing powers, would any of you have taken me seriously?" He looked at the test results on the screens. "On Earth, we've always known that smiles help people feel better. We just didn't understand the science behind it until we met other species. Your advanced medical equipment helped us see what was really happening." Dr. Kiwoo looked troubled. "This could change everything we know about medicine. That's why we kept it quiet at first," Dr. Park explained. "We needed to understand it better. But now that you've discovered the truth, we can work together to help more patients." Dr. Jai-yun studied her readings again. "The effect seems strongest when the smile is genuine and when the doctor truly cares about helping. It's not just the muscles. There's an emotional component too." Dr. Park nodded. "That's right. A fake smile doesn't work as well. The desire to heal must be real. So that's why you're always smiling. Dr. Kiwu said slowly. You're actually treating patients all the time, even when you're just talking to them. Every smile is medicine, Dr. Park said softly. Every kind word helps healing. Humans have always known this in our hearts. Now we can prove it with science. Dr. Jai-yun saved all her data and looked at both doctors. What do we do with this information? We share it, Dr. Park said, his smile growing brighter. It's time for the galaxy to understand why humans smile so much. We're not just being friendly. We're helping heal the universe, one smile at a time. As if to prove his point, the medical monitors in the lab recorded another surge of healing energy as his smile brightened. Now that they knew what to look for, they could see the effect clearly. The human doctor's smile was literally lighting up their instruments with healing power. The main medical conference room of station NK-427 was filled with doctors from every department. The emergency meeting had been called by Dr. Kiwu after Dr. Jai-yun's discovery about human smiles. Dr. Park sat calmly at one end of the long table, still wearing his signature smile. This is a serious violation of medical protocols, said Dr. Kiwu, standing at the front of the room. Dr. Park has been using an unauthorized biological influence on patients without proper documentation or approval. The room filled with concerned murmurs. Many doctors looked at Dr. Park with worry or suspicion. Every treatment I used was properly recorded, Dr. Park responded, his smile unchanged. I simply smiled while providing approved medical care. That smile is the issue, Dr. Kiwu said firmly. Dr. Jai-yun's research shows it produces measurable biological effects. You were essentially giving patients an untested treatment without their knowledge. Dr. Jai-yun stood up next. The data is clear, she said, showing charts on the large screen. Human smiles trigger healing responses in most species. Dr. Park knew this and used it deliberately. Of course I used it deliberately, Dr. Park said. His smile remained, but his voice became more serious. Just like I deliberately wash my hands before treating patients or deliberately speak kindly to them. These are all parts of being a doctor. An older doctor from the surgery department spoke up. But this is different. You're using a biological capability that affects patient chemistry without consent. Do you ask patients for permission before speaking in a calming voice? Dr. Park asked. Do you get signed forms before showing concern for their well-being? These are natural human behaviors that help healing. The room grew quiet as doctors considered his words. Dr. Jai-yun looked at her research data again. The effect appears completely safe, she added. In fact, it seems to improve the effectiveness of standard treatments. That's not the point, Dr. Kiwu insisted. Medical treatments must be properly tested and documented. We can't allow doctors to use unknown biological influences on patients. Dr. Park finally stood up. His smile remained, but now everyone in the room could feel its power, thanks to Dr. Jai-yun's research. You're asking me to stop being human, he said quietly. Smiling is part of who we are. Would you ask a Lumerian doctor to stop glowing, or a Meridian healer to stop humming? Every species brings their natural abilities to their medical practice. But those abilities are well documented, another doctor argued. We've never studied human smiles before. Then let's study them now, Dr. Park suggested. Let's understand this gift properly. But don't ask me to stop smiling at my patients. That would go against everything I believe as a doctor. Dr. Kiwu looked around the room. Some doctors were nodding in agreement with Dr. Park. Others still seemed worried. Perhaps, Dr. Jai-yun said carefully, we should focus on understanding and documenting this ability rather than trying to stop it. After all, the results speak for themselves. The medical board talked for hours. Finally, they reached a decision. Dr. Park could continue his practice, but all patients would be informed about the healing effects of human smiles. Dr. Jai-yun would lead a full research project to study this phenomenon. As the meeting ended, Dr. Park's smile seemed brighter than ever. He knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in galactic medicine. The news about human smiles spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. 3 months after Dr. Jai-yun's discovery, medical centers everywhere were talking about smile therapy. Dr. Park found himself at the center of a medical revolution. The Galactic Medical Network invited Dr. Park to speak at their main station. Thousands of doctors from different species gathered to learn about human healing smiles. As he walked onto the stage, sensors in the room detected the now familiar healing energy coming from his smile. "Fellow doctors," he began, "for centuries, humans knew that smiles helped healing. Now we understand why. Our smiles can help your patients heal faster and feel better." In the audience, Dr. Jai-yun watched the readings on her equipment. Even across such a large room, Dr. Park's smile affected everyone present. She had spent months studying this phenomenon and still found it amazing. Not everyone welcomed this discovery. Traditional medical groups argued against using human smiles as treatment. They said it wasn't proper medicine. "This is just emotional manipulation," said one famous doctor on the Galactic News. "We cannot trust our patients' health to human facial expressions." But the patients themselves had different ideas. Many began specifically requesting human doctors. Some medical centers reported that just having a smiling human nurse in the room improved recovery rates. Dr. Kiwoo, who had once doubted Dr. Park, now helped set up the first human smile research center on station NK427. They studied how different types of smiles affected different species. "We found that genuine smiles work best," Dr. Jai-yun explained to visiting doctors. "The healing effect is strongest when the human truly cares about helping others." Medical schools across the galaxy started adding new courses. Understanding human expressions became a required subject. Young doctors learned about the science behind smiles and how to work with human medical staff. One day, Dr. Park walked into the research center to find a surprise. A group of young doctors from 10 different species waited to meet him. They wanted to learn his techniques. "Can you teach us to work with human doctors?" they asked. "We want to understand how to combine smile therapy with our traditional treatments." Dr. Park spent the next few weeks teaching them. He showed them how to measure the effects of smiles, how to position human medical staff for the best results, and how to explain this treatment to patients. "Remember," he told them, "the smile is not magic. It's a natural tool that works best when combined with proper medical care and genuine compassion." The revolution brought unexpected changes. Some alien species began trying to copy human facial expressions. Others developed new medical devices that could record and replay the healing energy of human smiles. Dr. Jai-yun's research showed another interesting fact. When patients learned to smile back at their doctors, their recovery rates improved even more. It seemed that smiling wasn't just healing, it was contagious. Near the end of that year, the Galactic Medical Council made a historic announcement. They officially recognized human emotional expression as a valid form of medical treatment. They created new guidelines for using smile therapy in hospitals throughout the galaxy. Dr. Park watched all this from his office on station NK427, still wearing his gentle smile. On his desk sat a new title card, Director of Human Emotional Medicine. Behind him, the stars seemed to shine a bit brighter, as if the universe itself was smiling at how far they had come. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Medical Council recognized human smiles as official treatment. Space Station NK427 had changed dramatically. The medical center now had an entire department dedicated to human emotional medicine, with Dr. Park as its director and Dr. Jai-yun as his deputy. The morning started like any other. Dr. Park walked through the halls, greeting patients and staff with his healing smile. But today was special. It was the first graduation day for the new Human-Alien Medical Integration Program. In the main lecture hall, 20 doctors from different species sat ready for their final lesson. They had spent months learning how to work with human medical staff and understand the science of smile therapy. Dr. Park stood at the front of the room, his smile as powerful as ever. The monitoring equipment showed the familiar healing energy filling the space. "Today marks a new chapter in galactic medicine," he began. "You are the first class to complete this program. Each of you now understands how to combine traditional treatments with human emotional healing." Dr. Jai Yun presented each graduate with their certification. The new protocols they had developed were now standard practice across thousands of medical facilities. After the ceremony, a young doctor from a crystal species, like Little Minna, Dr. Park's first special case, approached him with a question. "Dr. Park," the young doctor asked, "something has been bothering me. Why did humans evolve such a powerful healing ability? What made your species develop these special smiles?" Dr. Park's smile grew thoughtful. The room fell quiet as others gathered to hear his answer. "On Earth," he began, "our ancestors faced many challenges. We weren't the strongest or fastest creatures. We couldn't fly or breathe underwater. But we learned that by working together and caring for each other, we could survive." He continued, "Our smiles evolved as a way to show friendship and build trust. Over time, they became more than just expressions. They became a way to share healing energy with others. We didn't know the science behind it until we met other species, but we always knew that kindness and compassion could help healing." Dr. Kiwu, who had become one of Dr. Park's strongest supporters, added, "And now we understand that the human smile is one of the most sophisticated healing tools in the galaxy." At that moment, emergency alarms sounded. A patient needed immediate care. Without hesitation, the newly graduated doctors moved into action, working seamlessly with their human colleagues. Dr. Park watched with pride as human and alien medical staff worked together, combining traditional treatments with smile therapy. The patient stabilized quickly under their coordinated care. Later that evening, Dr. Park stood at the same window where he had first arrived at the station. His reflection smiled back at him in the glass. "Dr. Park," Dr. Jai Yun called from behind him, "the latest research results are in. We've documented healing effects we never imagined possible when human and alien medical techniques work together." "Because sometimes," Dr. Park said softly, still smiling at the stars, "the best medicine isn't medicine at all. It's the connection we share with each other, across all species and throughout the galaxy." His smile brightened one last time, and somewhere in the vast space before him, a new star seemed to twinkle in response, as if the universe itself was learning to smile back.